After a long and risky operation in Gaza overnight, the IDF recovered the bodies of 6 hostages from a tunnel in Khan Yunis. They are the bodies of Chaim Perry, Yoram Metzger, Avraham Mundar, Nadav Popwell, Alex Danzig, and Yagev Bushtab. Mundar was not previously counted among the dead. 109 hostages, living and dead, remain in Hamas captivity. The rescue operation was conducted under the command of the 98th Division and carried out by the Paratroopers Brigade Yahalom Unit and the 75th Battalion, along with Shabak forces. Back in Israel, the bodies went through an identification procedure carried out by the National Institute of Forensic Medicine and the Israel Police. The families of the hostages were notified. The 6 victims were all captured alive on October 7th and later killed by Hamas in Gaza. In May, Hamas released a video of Perry and Mundar as part of their psychological warfare, depicting the desperate situation of these elderly men. The IDF is expected to release more details soon on the rescue operation. May their memories be a blessing. And now on to day 319 of the war in Gaza, as intense military operations continue in northern and central Gaza, including the overnight rescue. Here's more.
The IDF says that at least 25 Hamas terrorists have been killed since the start of the week, as the army struck Hamas facilities in central Gaza and dismantled terrorist infrastructure above and below ground in the south. Troops from the 7th Brigade expanded the operation in the Gaza Strip to the Khan Yunis area and the outskirts of Deir al-Balach. The troops are eliminating terrorists and destroying combat compounds above and below ground. In one compound, troops from the 603rd Battalion located dozens of rocket launchers and several anti-tank missiles. With intelligence guidance, the 603rd Battalion and the Yahalom unit located and destroyed an underground tunnel route approximately 1.5 kilometers long. Along the route, an active compound of Hamas terrorists was located, and inside weapons and equipment for a long stay. The terrorists fled the compound before the arrival of the forces. Meanwhile, the IDF announced that an officer was killed in the fighting. Lieutenant Shachar Ben Nun, aged 21, was from Petach Tikva and a commander in the paratroopers reconnaissance unit. He fell during combat in the southern Gaza Strip.
The U.S. and Israel are now on the same page in the hostage for ceasefire talks. This after U.S. Secretary of State Blinken said that Prime Minister Netanyahu has accepted Washington's bridging proposal presented by mediators last weekend in Doha. The U.S. is now demanding that Hamas comply. Blinken headed from Jerusalem to Cairo to join the renewed talks.
Speaking after a 3-hour meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken said the burden was now on Hamas to accept the U.S. bridging proposal.
In a very constructive meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu today, he confirmed to me that Israel accepts the bridging proposal, that he supports it. It's now incumbent on Hamas to do the same. And then the parties, with the help of the mediators, the United States, Egypt, and Qatar, have to come together and complete the process of reaching clear understandings about how they'll implement the commitments.
Prime Minister Netanyahu acknowledged that progress has been made and thanked the Biden administration for mediating the hostage deal and for supporting Israel's vital security interests.
הייתה לי היום פגישה טובה וחשובה עם מזכיר המדינה בלינקן. אני מאוד מעריך את המאמצים שארצות הברית משקיעה בהגנה אזורית מול הציר האיראני. זה חשוב כמובן למדינת ישראל. ואני גם מאוד מעריך את ההבנה שארצות הברית גילתה לאינטרסים ביטחוניים חיוניים שלנו, תוך כדי המאמצים המשותפים שלנו להביא לשחרור חטופינו. ואני מבקש להדגיש, מאמצים לשחרור מקסימום מספר חטופים חיים כבר בשלב הראשון של העסקה.
A senior Hamas spokesman said that the U.S. had given in to Israeli pressure and changed the deal.
نحن لسنا بحاجة لمزيد من المفاوضات، نحن بحاجة إلى اتفاق على آليات التنفيذ. بلينكن عندما يقول أن الإسرائيليين وافقوا ثم يقول الإسرائيليون أن هناك ورقة محدثة، هذا يعني أن الإدارة الأمريكية تخضع للضغوط الإسرائيلية وليس العكس.
Before leaving Israel, Blinken said this.
From here, I'm going on to Egypt and Qatar. These are our two critical partners in this effort to get the ceasefire agreement over the finish line, to get the hostages home, to put everyone on a better path to lasting peace and security. And so I look forward to consulting with President Sisi, with the Emir, Sheikh Tamim, with other critical colleagues in both countries on the immediate steps ahead, and in particular, what needs to be done to ensure that Hamas comes along.
And joining us now from Jerusalem is Ambassador Yoram Ettinger. Yoram, good to see you again.
Thank you.
Secretary Blinken announced the Israeli agreement to the bridging proposal, and he headed to Doha and Cairo and borrowed a football phrase to take it over the goal line. So will he score a touchdown and get the deal done?
Well, my own recommendation is for the Israeli government to be very skeptic of anything proposed by Secretary Blinken in view of his track record. Secretary Blinken pressures Israel to follow the U.S. diplomatic option towards Iran and adapt it towards Hamas and Hezbollah, while in fact the U.S. diplomatic option towards Iran showered the Ayatollahs with hundreds of billions of dollars, which have transformed the Ayatollahs from a secondary regional global military power to a very primary global power and the chief epicenter of anti-U.S. Terrorism, drug trafficking, money laundering, and the proliferation of military systems to anti-U.S. entities. Secretary Blinken is actually ignoring the fact that his own pressure on Israel during prior clashes with Hamas produced series of negotiations with Hamas, and each one served to bolster Hamas capabilities, ushering in the October 7 horrific terror committed by Hamas in Israel. And last and not least, the Secretary ignores a very fundamental fact in the Middle East, that gestures, concessions, retreats are interpreted by Middle East rogue elements as weakness, which whets the appetite of terrorists, in this case, Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, as well as the Palestinian Authority.
Ambassador, help me understand what you're saying. I mean, the U.S. are the ones that brought this deal to the table. The U.S. are the ones that provide all of our weapons, basically. Without the U.S., you're saying that the U.S. should back off, let Israel go it alone against Iran and Hezbollah. How's that been going for us?
No, what I suggest is that Secretary Blinken should focus on America's best interest. And America's best interest.
But you're going to tell Blinken what his best interests are, what the United States' best interests are? I think they know themselves what their own best interests are, and they're trying to express them to us.
Well, we have seen the misinterpretation or the self-destructive interpretation of American interest in Afghanistan. We have seen it way back when Ayatollah Khomeini took over Iran with the blessing of the USA. We have seen it with the US supporting the Mujahideen in their war against Soviet military, expelling the Soviets from Afghanistan, and in return, as expected, they haunted the USA.
So let me just understand, Ambassador, you're essentially saying the best thing for Israel to do right now is wait out the U.S. election. Maybe the Republicans will be elected, Trump will be in office, and then there'll be a better policy that the U.S. And Israel can be on better terms and go forward together. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, what I'm saying is that before accepting any proposal by Secretary Blinken, Israel should do the fundamental study, namely, what's the track record of Secretary Blinken's proposals? Secretary Blinken, for instance, played a key role in the betrayal of pro-US Mubarak in Egypt and support facilitating the rise to power in Egypt of anti-US Muslim Brotherhood. Secretary Blinken played a key role in orchestrating the US-led NATO military offensive against Gaddafi of Libya, which transformed Libya from a country fighting Islamic terrorism to a chaotic country, a major platform of anti-American Islamic terrorism and an arena for civil wars which have raged the country from 2011 until this very day. And Secretary Blinken played a key role in recent cycles of wars, violence, and negotiation between Israel and Hamas. And each such cycle, which under Blinken's pressure was concluded with another series of negotiations with Hamas, served to bolster Hamas into becoming the most fortified state terror anywhere in the world. Such a track record.
We're out of time, Yoram. Thank you for that. Thanks so much for that, Yoram. Family members of Israeli hostages protested outside the Tel Aviv hotel where U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was working yesterday to finalize a ceasefire deal. ILTV's Mayan Hoffman shares video captured by Reuters from the scene.
Dozens of family members of Israeli hostages held in Gaza held a protest outside the Tel Aviv hotel where U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was holding his meetings on Monday with the aim of finalizing a hostage ceasefire deal.
We want to thank the American administration for putting this effort on both parties to sign a deal now. Our loved ones are suffering and there is no time to waste.
Antony Blinken, please push Netanyahu for a deal at any price, because I want my son to be free. I want my son back home.
The protesters waved flags and chanted SOS USA and seal the deal now as Blinken met with top Israeli officials as well as the families of hostages who hold U.S. citizenship. Among those family members was Lee Siegel, whose brother Keith has been held hostage by Hamas for nearly 320 days.
We had a meeting that provided information. It provided a certain level of optimism. We know that we are on a journey. The journey needs to finish as quickly as possible.
There are still 109 Israeli hostages held captive in the coastal enclave after the 6 who were rescued overnight. Israel believes at least a third of them are already dead. Blinken met on Monday with President Isaac Herzog, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Blinken said that Israel has accepted the ceasefire deal. However, Hamas remains in opposition.
Kedumim terror victim Gidon Perry was laid to rest in the town cemetery. The country was brought to tears by the sight and sound of his 8-year-old son, Regev, saying Kaddish, the Jewish mourner's prayer for his father. Perry worked as a civilian security guard and was bludgeoned with a hammer by a Palestinian worker while escorting him to a nearby industrial zone. The terrorist fled with Perry's gun and remains at large. Perry was married and the father of 3. He served a lengthy service in the IDF reserves in the war in Gaza and was released 2 months ago. The rumblings of a coming war are continuing along the northern border amid continuing cross-border tit-for-tat between Israel and Hezbollah. The Air Force struck deep inside Lebanon, hitting a major weapons storage facility in the eastern Bekaa Valley near the Syrian border. Hezbollah fired a huge volley of 75 projectiles toward Israel this afternoon.
The IDF struck 3 Hezbollah weapons storage facilities close to the Syrian border. At least one of the airstrikes caused secondary blasts, indicating the detonation of weapons stored in the site. Lebanese officials indicated that 9 people were injured. Following warnings that were activated in the Upper Galilee and the Golan Heights, about 55 launches were detected that crossed from Lebanon. Some of the launches were intercepted, the rest fell in open areas, and no casualties were reported. Firefighters are working to extinguish the blazes that broke out in several areas that were impacted. Shortly after the launches, the Air Force attacked one of the launching sites. Last night, fighter jets of the Air Force attacked 2 launchers in the area of Al-Mansuri and Taiba in South Lebanon. The launchers that were attacked were ready for immediate launch into northern Israel. IDF Chief of Staff Halevi was in the north meeting with heads of the Northern Command and the Air Force. They discussed the current deployment, ready to move to the offensive if ordered to do so. For 3 weeks, Hezbollah has been promising a retaliation for the killing of its military commander Fuad Shukri in Beirut. The question now, how long can Israel tolerate the continuing attacks on the north? Earlier, the IDF announced the death of a soldier wounded in yesterday's Hezbollah drone strike. He is Chief Warrant Officer Mahmoud Amaria, a 45-year-old tracker from the Bedouin village of Ibtin in northern Israel.
In the U.S., pro-Palestinian demonstrators clashed with security outside the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, leading to several arrests. At the same time, pro-Israeli protesters and hostage families were also in the Windy City, hoping to spread a message for the release of Israeli hostages. More from ILTV's editor, Mayan Hoffman.
At least 4 pro-Palestinian demonstrators were arrested on Monday outside the Democratic National Convention in Chicago after they broke through part of the perimeter security fence, drawing riot police to the site. At no point was there any threat to attendees. The protesters were among thousands of people who turned out to march on the day that U.S. President Joe Biden delivered his speech. They held signs that read, "Stand with Palestine" and "End U.S. aid to Israel," among other messages. At one point, chants of "Killer Kamala" could be heard.
Kamala Harris has expressed her sympathies for the Palestinian people and what they're going through, but nice words is not enough. We want action, and that's why we're here saying that she should call for an arms embargo. She should say that the United States should not be giving this rock-solid support to Israel. She should say that the U.S. shouldn't be vetoing resolutions at the United Nations. She should show us that her policy is not going to be the same one as Joe Biden's.
Protesters, including Palestinian and Arab Americans, turned out in much smaller numbers than the expected tens of thousands. Still, they aim to send a message to the Democratic Party. Their votes must be earned. The Israel-Hamas war, now in its 11th month, has weakened support for Democrats among Muslim and Arab American voters, who are vital in key battleground states like Arizona, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
I want to tell the Democrats that they don't have our votes unless they meet our demands. The Democrats think that just because they're not Trump, they deserve our votes. We need our voices to be heard. I don't want to spend any more money sending bombs to Israel. That's how we all feel, and we're not going to just roll over for them.
A small number of pro-Israel supporters were also in attendance at a counter rally, pushing the U.S. to continue to support Israel and its right to defend itself. Many said they had already decided to vote for the alternative, former U.S. President Donald Trump.
I am going to vote for the only party that is protecting the Jewish people right now, which is the Republican Party and President Donald J. Trump.
I think from what I've observed, I think the Republican Party has been more strong on supporting Israel as our strongest ally in the Middle East at this point.
In addition, family members of 8 American hostages were in the crowd Monday evening when Biden took to the main stage. The president called for an end of the Gaza war and emphasized peace for Israel while acknowledging the pro-Palestinian protesters outside.
And now this special feature from the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. President Yael Eckstein highlights 3 important recent headlines you might have missed, but are crucial to understand.
Shalom, my friends, from here in the Holy Land. I'm Yael Eckstein, and here are 3 things that you should know about Israel this week. Number 1, Israel is on high alert as Iran and their proxy terrorist armies are threatening to attack Israel in an unprecedented attack. Hezbollah has said that it is going to bring the war with Israel to a new stage, with thousands of rockets and suicide drones pointing towards the Holy Land. We are preparing, we are praying, and we are believing that light will always outshine the darkness. And ultimately, Israel will be protected. Israel will be safe. Number 2, in some positive news, Israelis across the country stood together to mark Ariel Bibas's 5th birthday. Ariel is celebrating this birthday in Hamas captivity. Him and his younger brother, just 1 year old, together with their parents, were taken hostage from their house by Hamas terrorists on October 7th. Israelis across the country have baked birthday cakes, are blowing out candles, are releasing balloons, all with the prayer that he will be released soon back to Israel, along with the other 120 hostages. Happy birthday, Ariel. We will never stop praying and acting for your immediate return. And number 3, in some fellowship news, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is working around the clock and against the clock in order to provide food boxes to bomb shelters in anticipation of an attack from Iran and Hezbollah. We have packed and delivered over 10,000 food boxes across Israel, and especially on the borders that are most at risk. The fellowship is there to help the weakest and the most vulnerable who are in public shelters and don't have food or water. We are there to tell them that they are not alone. Well, there you have it, my friends. Those are 3 things that you now know about Israel this week. Join me next week, same place, same time, for more up-to-date news on what's happening in the Holy Land. Shalom.
12 leading Israeli tech entrepreneurs with operations in the States rang the New York Stock Exchange opening bell in a demonstration of the financial world's solidarity and support for Israel and its belief in the Israeli economy and businesses. The event was organized by Israeli Mapped in New York and its founder, Guy Franklin. The entrepreneurs came from key industries including cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, fintech, media, and more. There are more than 450 Israeli startups operating in New York City. The opening bell highlights the ongoing collaboration and innovation that Israeli tech leaders bring to New York. Franklin told ILTV that the growth of the tech ecosystem in New York has been extraordinary, with Israeli founders playing a pivotal role in driving innovation and economic success. Franklin said that since October 7th, despite immense challenges, Israeli tech has continued to deliver, demonstrating resilience and commitment to excellence. Well, let's take a look at the weather forecast. It's mid-August, and it was a scorcher. Today's low was 69 Fahrenheit or 20 Celsius. Tomorrow's highs will reach 92 Fahrenheit or 33 Celsius. Drink plenty of water, use sunblock, and wear a hat. That's my advice. And that's a wrap for today's news. And for the latest updates from Israel on all of your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Steve Leibowitz. Be well, and let's bring our hostages home.